so much. I love you so much. I love you so much. I love you so much.
Hello, all you positive heads out there. Thanks for tuning your beautiful brainwaves into another episode of the Positive Head Podcast, where we are firmly convinced that creating success and happiness is rooted in understanding the ultimate nature of reality and the fact that as human beings, we are all immensely powerful fractals of the one and only source consciousness, which creates and animates all things. Now, of course, understanding this powerful truth is one thing. Applying this incredibly empowering wisdom to everyday life? Well, that's another, which is exactly why we provide you with a fresh serving of soul food for thought 5 days a week to help constantly remind you of what matters most. You are it. And I'm your host, Brandon Beecham. I'm the reflection and extension of you who will be here each Wednesday interviewing a different consciousness changemaker. And on the other 4 weekdays, leading the way to ensure that your perspective is consistently expanded, your vibration is constantly elevated, and your heart is overflowing and full. Also, before we jump into today's episode, I'd like to take about a minute and a half to tell you about a few sponsors that not only help to make it possible to produce this show 5 days a week, but that I'm also genuinely passionate about promoting. The first longtime stellar supporter of the show that I want to mention is Gaia. If you're not familiar, Gaia is the go-to source for streaming consciousness content online with over 8,000 video titles. And you can sign up for your first month for only 99 cents at gaia.com/positivehead. That's spelled GAIA.com/positivehead. The second sponsor I'm sincerely passionate about promoting is Purium. It's no mystery that bringing your mind, body, and spirit into balance is necessary if a person truly intends to manifest the greatest and grandest version of themselves. So if you've been looking for a way to easily get organic superfoods into your system every day with a simple plan that can help you reestablish a healthier foundation and relationship with food, like I was doing before I found Purium, I highly recommend going to positivehead.com/transformation and checking out the videos and interviews there where I dive deeply into discussions explaining why I take these products every day. And should you ultimately end up on iShopPurium.com to purchase any of their 50 plus amazing superfood products, be sure to use the code POSITIVEHEAD, all one word, for a 25% discount. All right, all you positive heads. On this week's Soul Share, I'm very excited to have Sky Nelson-Isaacs here with me on the show. Sky is a physicist, musician, and author who has just released his first book, Living in Flow, The Science of Synchronicity and How Your Choices Shape Your World. And I'm sure you guys can understand I'm excited to have this one on. What a perfect conversation for the show. Hello, Sky. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Good morning, Brandon. It's great to be on the show with you. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, absolutely. It is definitely in the flow to have you talk about synchronicity, one of my favorite topics. It's just it never ceases to stop fascinating me and amazing me. And I think that's the reason why a lot of it happens. And we'll dig into all that. Before I get ahead of myself, I want to start at the very top where, I have the predictable opening question and closing question. And my opening question, I always like to go to is this. You're in an elevator. The woman next to you looks over, says, "What's your passion?" You got 10 floors to answer. What do you say?
I'm passionate about empowering people like myself to feel excited about life, to see that the world brings opportunities every day, every few moments to dive into life a little more fully in ways that might be stretching our comfort zone, but expand us to be whole people.
Love that. I love that. Yeah, empowering seems to be like a key word. It's like you're an emperor, empowerer, and I feel like that is the path, you know, for so many of us, realizing that by empowering others, we empower ourselves. And so I definitely resonate with that one.
Yeah, and I think the world is built for that. I think it's actually a machine. It's a place that is meant to bring us situations that empower us. And in this world we're coming into, where there's billions of people that are all networked together, it's not about a top-down hierarchy, but a mutually entangled empowerment of each other. That's how we're going to solve the problems.
I love that. Definitely, even in business, there's a organizational model called holacracy. That's a flat organization, and I really like that. I've looked at implementing that into one of my ventures where I have an ever growing number of employees and so forth. And I definitely feel you. I feel like the hierarchy, the hierarchy that is sort of run the show for so long needs to be revamped in a way that is beneficial to not just, when you have like a handful of families that control half the wealth on the planet, there's a problem.
Yeah. There's a book, I've read about holacracy quite a bit, and I talk about it in my book a bit.
Really? Well, there's a synchronicity right there. I had no idea.
Yeah. And there's a book by Frederick Laloux, Laloux, called Rethinking Organizations, which looks at this model he calls teal, like as in the color teal. And it's the hierarchy of the colors of expanding awareness. I'm blanking on the framework right now, but he talks about he does case studies on different organizations that use this flat model, or this way of everyone being in control of some part of a project and having influence over the whole organization. It's called, it's like a living organism.
Yes.
Model.
Yes. That's what I love about, holacracy. It's sort of based off of this sort of the way that the brain and body works, right? Holons in the brain. And you have I love they use the example I remember in the book. It's like, you don't go into the local Starbucks and the mayor comes down to sort of run things, right? It's right. Handled independently. And so meanwhile, at a hierarchy in a traditional business thinking in business terms, especially, the CEOs at the top making decisions, many levels down, and where they have no visibility oftentimes into what's going on, which is a problem in itself. But meanwhile, the people best equipped to make decisions are the ones locally, feet boots on the ground, so to speak. The people who are in the trenches doing it have the visibility on how things should be running, in that part of the organization. Yeah. And it just makes a lot of sense.
And I think so that's very much true at the higher level. And then I think you can also shrink that down to at the individual level and look at, well, how do I run my life like that? From this top-down approach. How do I plan out my day in advance, think I know where I'm going to go, and then miss opportunities for what I call opportunities for redirection? Like when life throws an obstacle in the path, and being able to see how that obstacle might align with some of the goals I actually have for my day or for my life. And being able to work with that. And I think, that's where businesses can fall down, and that's also where humans can fall down, getting stuck on those obstacles that get in the way of their plans for the day. Right.
Well, let's do this. I'd love to get a little bit of backstory. That's the other thing, at the top of the show. I like to get an idea of who I'm talking with, how they landed here. Tell us a little bit. I mean, that's quite the interesting combination of things. Physicist, musician, now author, which is super exciting, by the way. Congratulations on that. Love to hear how you got up to this point.
Yeah, I've been doing. There's a lot of pieces to the puzzle. I started playing music when I was really little and kept doing that my whole life. I do it semi-professionally now as well. So I was never able to let that go and just follow a path of science. But in college, I ended up studying physics and really loved that. I found it really aligned ultimately with the path I was on of trying to understand myself and sort of a spiritual perspective on life. I've always had a belief that the spiritual experiences I've had can line up with my scientific understanding. Right. And so my path has been trying to do that, trying to align those things. And then so a lot of the ideas that I'm working on now from a scientific perspective to understand the cosmos and synchronicity and things like that came to me early on when I was studying in college and just got fascinated by certain ideas that stood out. So I went on to become a science teacher, a high school physics teacher for quite a while. And I've also spent some time, took the risk of leaving that in order to play music full time. And I've developed that as a profession. I've spent some time doing software project management and testing, engineering that I did. Actually, that happened about 3 weeks after the economy crashed in 2008. I was already in process to get a job because the flow was leading me there. And so I left music full time to get a job at that time. And it was great timing with the economy going down. And I was, happy to have that security. And then eventually left that to go back and get a master's degree. And I got a master's in physics. And
wow,
that's led me to where I am now. And I'm doing research and writing a book and doing music also. I've got an album coming out later in the year. But it's hard for me to let any of those go because they're all really core to who I am. And a lot of what I'm about is being a whole person and not shutting out certain aspects of myself because I'm uncomfortable with them or because society tells me I have to. I think we can all tap into that.
Yeah, I love that. I relate so much to that. You hear this idea of that one thing, right? Be good at the one thing. And there was a book even a few years ago that was really popular. I forget the name of it.
Yeah, it's familiar though. Yeah.
Yeah. And maybe it is even called The One Thing. I can't remember.
Yeah,
but it's because I think about too many things to remember what the name of the book is. But yeah, it's always been something that you hear that. And then I'm someone the same way who really just likes exploring, multiple facets of what my potential is. And we get this idea that we've got to just put all our eggs in one basket. And I of course get the idea. I understand it's like, hey, the more you're focused on something, the more proficient you become and all those things. But it's as someone who has more ideas than I have minutes in a day, it feels like it's hard for me to sort of, only choose one thing to focus on. And I think being well-rounded is really important. It's, it's so easy to get burnt out if you're just doing one thing.
Well, here's the thing. I think that you and I are doing just one thing, but you have to look carefully at what that is. For you, the focus on a podcast that covers a lot of different ground, the podcast is the expression of the one thing, and then you get to explore all the different things that come up for you. And for me, the one thing has always been a deep investigation into why I'm here and what the cosmos is and, how to live my life in the best possible way that I don't look back and have regrets and wish I had made different decisions. And that has led to a path of trying to understand it through physics and also trying to understand it through communication with others and through spiritual experience and meditation and through music. My music is all positively lyrics and intended to convey the same message.
Yeah, definitely cut from a similar cloth. Like I ended up, in California, where I currently live, traveling across country with my band for music. Spent many years making, music. Going back to around 2000, and talking. A lot of the lyrics and things were, really poetry in a sense for me, expressing my ideas about the ultimate nature of reality and the things we talk about on the show. And at the time, a lot of people are like, what are you talking about? Like, I didn't have a lot of people in my life, like now it's like I'm just surrounded by people who are on this spiritual path. And at the time it was not the case. And my music was an outlet to sort of express these ideas that, aside from reading some books of people that, certainly weren't in my life or on a show that I produced or anything like that. Whereas now it's like, so, it's the world is so much smaller, it seems. And my whole peer group is, on a very similar spiritual path. And so, but yeah, I relate from, being an entrepreneur, musician, doing this show, now working on a new, TV style video production show coming, starting this summer. And, that's just some of the, there's so many things that, I'd like to do. And so I guess there's also the idea, we can do anything, we can't do everything. So at some point you have to start sort of narrowing down what is your highest excitement. And, I think what the things to me, quantum physics is fascinating. It's like it really is showing, how science and spirituality merge. I just started reading or listening to the book "Becoming Supernatural" by Joe Dispenza. I don't know if you're familiar with it or not, and it's tying in science and spirituality in a way that is just I love. It's such a potent combination, is a way to express what's going on here.
Right. Yeah. There's a process that I call the Lorax process, which we can get into a little bit later. But part of it is around it's listening, opening, reflecting, releasing, and then taking an action from that place. So, and then repeating that cycle over and over. And there's an element there of empowerment. And I think it's really important for people or for me, in my experience, it's been really important. And I encourage people to look at what is the core thing in their life that they're, list of a few core things in their life that they're going for. And you always keeping that in mind so that when situations show up, they can tune in like, oh yeah, well, this aligns with my desire to, improve my relationship, or this aligns with my desire to get better at, software engineering or whatever it may be for somebody. And so I think we can do what we want to do in the world, but we have to get clear on what it is that really drives us. And usually that's been with us our whole life. Right.
Yeah, the other thing that comes to mind speaking to someone who's a physicist, I'm sure you're familiar with Nassim Haramein. And, he says a quote I saw from him not so long ago. He said, spirituality is physics that has not yet been explained by science. And I think that's an interesting, perspective. It's like, it's really just two sides of the same coin. I feel like you're looking at it from multiple angles, right? It is all the same thing. Or you could say physics is spirituality that has not yet been, fully understood, or something to that effect, right? So it's just different approaches.
That's what drove me to really understand synchronicity. I started to be able to identify the experience of synchronicity in my life more, and I realized that that's been something that's been with me my whole life, and maybe it's at the core of spiritual experience in general. People have what they call religious experiences, and a lot of times you can trace it back to somebody showing up in their life at just the right moment, or some situation that shows up in their life that is difficult but is filled with this experience of grace. And a lot of times those things are about the timing and the weaving together of our lives. And in my view, that's synchronicity showing up.
Right.
So I started to say, okay, well, maybe the core essence of my experience here is trying to understand how these synchronistic experiences align in my life. And either I'm making it up and it's just in my head and it's this psychological thing of meaning making that people talk about a lot.
Yep.
Or there's physics to it. That's one or the other, because physics is what describes the physical world, and these things are physical situations. So it was one of those two, and then I've had some experiences that I've actually calculated and just tried to show that it's not reasonable to try and rely on statistics to explain some of the experiences that I've had and that people have had. And for one thing, there's experiences that are so unusual that you can't really rely on statistics.
Exactly.
And on the other hand, there's experiences that are not that unusual, but they happen so frequently. Like just always running into the person you need to run into or finding the information you need to find, that it's, again, statistically, it's actually just not that reasonable to rely on random chance. And it would be better if there was a law of physics or a description in physics. And so my hope is to do some of that work to bring that into the rigorous realm.
Wow. What a wonderful aim to have. And, for me, Sky, it's sort of, I view it almost as these threads of connectivity. I feel like there's so much, the 3D reality, our experience here is all reflection, energetic reflection and vibration. And so I feel like it's happening. It's just to different degrees. It's always reflecting back to you. There's these threads of connectivity, and maybe some of the times, when they're dramatic reflections, we are like, whoa, I really recognize the connection between this and that. And, this is profound, and this, multi-layered synchronicities, even sometimes going many levels deep, how things are tying together. And other times they're more subtle, like very little, energetic connections. Oh, I just talked about, I don't know, pig farming. Yeah, exactly. There you go. And it's just like, little threads of connectivity. You talk about something random in the morning, and then later in the evening, someone else brings up that same exact thing, which is, very remote, that it's a topic, like I said, like pig farming. Oh, I talked about this morning and then this evening, and probably me even just saying pig farming, it came from, it'll be some synchronicity with a listener, because I have no reason to say that. Right. But, so it's really interesting, these threads of connectivity. And I think that helps for me sort of to find the defining characteristics of it. 'Cause sometimes we get caught up on, okay, what does it all mean? Well, sometimes I think there's a great message there, and I think other times it's like, oh, you're just seeing reflections of energetic connectivity. It's that is the message. There is no great thing that you need to learn or decision you need to make based off of noticing the synchronicity. And so that's sort of what I've landed on with it. So I'm curious, and in other times it's like a very it's really sending you that clear signal that, hey, you are in a flow state, you are on the path. And I think actually, that's another piece to this puzzle of when it arises, is when you are, when you're in alignment, when you're in a flow state, you're seeing them. And when you're, maybe depressed and angry or anything like that, out of alignment with your higher self, as I would put it, then you're not seeing these synchronicities. So so curious what you think about all that.
I think that one of the things people can get hung up on is seeing meaning in little coincidences, and I see synchronicity as a spectrum. There's some really intense, unusual, unlikely events that can happen. And then there's on the other end of the spectrum, there's things that happen just kind of daily, but make you stop, and people get hung up on seeing numbers or, special numbers or whatever it may be.
Right.
I think that part of the reason we get hung up on that is because we approach the world from, not everybody, but there's sort of in our culture, from the default perspective that that's not happening, that there's no connection, and there's no higher pattern or meta pattern connecting us. And if we approach the world from that perspective, even subconsciously, then when that stuff happens, we'll be kind of shocked, and we'll still try and make some meaning of it. Like, what was I doing just now that maybe that number came up and it should alert me to something, or, looking for a message. But for me, when I check in with myself in that space, if I'm doing that, I notice that I'm having some kind of inner feeling around it. Like there's maybe some anxiety around, what is it that I need to be doing right now that I need, that the world is trying to tell me or something.
Right.
So that's really what it's pointing to, is that there's some inner state that's unresolved, and I'm looking for someone to tell me what I need to do with my life. And that's an unempowered perspective that I often feel, But when I really tap into myself, and I feel the empowerment of being joyful about what I'm doing, having a sense of purpose in what I'm doing, then there's a knowing that comes from deep inside of me. And then any synchronicity that shows up in my life is really just a reflection of that knowing, and I know how to interpret it. So I don't get confused by synchronicities, trying to, figure out what they mean, because the meaning is actually coming from inside of me.
Right. Yeah. I think that is such an important piece. Like, in that I talk about all the time on this show, it's so important, the story you decide to tell about whatever's going on. It's everything. It defines the meaning, right? And so I said it just last week on the show. I've gotten just really, really good at making up good stories about why something happened, right? And abracadabra, I speak as I create as I speak, right? It's like, so, okay, this happened. Well, I'm going going to tell the story that it means this. And then, this gets into the whole idea that we are, one with the creator and therefore, with source, God, whatever you want to call it. And so therefore we create with our beliefs, right? So I strongly resonate with that idea of, deciding the meaning.
Yeah. I have two stories of synchronicity that illustrate this, and probably the listeners enjoy stories. So you want me to tell those?
Oh man. That's like, now you're getting to like my favorite thing ever is a good story. So yes, as many as you'd like to share.
So the biggest synchronicity that I've had that I would point to in my life happened when I was about 20, and my good friend and I had been friends since high school and then dropped out of touch. And her name is Dana. And she was going to Israel for a semester, and we had just reconnected in college. She was going to Israel to study, and I was going to travel around Europe for the same semester on backpacking on foot. So we decided to make a plan to meet. But it was, we were 20. And so the plan was really vague. It was like, let's just meet on a beach in Greece, because that sounds really fun. And it's kind of halfway between Europe and Israel,
Right.
So we made this plan. This is before cell phones, but there, we had email, but that was pretty early on. This is in the 90s.
Yep.
And I was traveling around Europe and on a backpacker's budget, couldn't really afford to call her. Finally, I called her one time, and she ended up picking up the phone. And after about 5 minutes of checking in, I realized I had spent my whole weekly budget, my food budget, on the phone call. So I hung up the phone and said, I'll call you when I get closer. So finally, I got to Italy, and I was on my way down to Greece. I was going to call her soon, and I ended up getting sick. I had to leave Europe and head home and change my plane ticket to be out of Paris about 3 days later. So I was really bummed. I figured I'd call her when I got back to California. And so I took a train up to Paris. Meanwhile, she's telling all her friends about this guy, Sky, who's going to call her, and they're going to go meet on a beach in Greece. And they don't really believe her because I haven't showed up. And finally they invite her to go to Paris for the weekend, this one weekend. And she's like, no, I got to stay here and wait for Sky, because if he doesn't call, I'm never going to see him.
Yeah.
I mean, if he calls while I'm gone, I'm never going to see him. And finally, she decides to take the chance and go to Paris with her friends. And good for her, because when she was there, she went to the Louvre Museum. And I also went to the Louvre Museum for the one day I had in Paris before my flight. And as I'm walking around the Louvre Museum, halfway through the day, I walk into this room and I see this person. And I'm just standing there staring at her, because I can't believe it looks just like Dana, but Dana's not, Dana's in Israel. So I'm confused. And she looks over, her friend looks over and says, don't look now, but there's this weird guy staring at you. And I was looking weird because I was dressed in a jacket. It was cold out. I was sick, and I was, had gloves on. And I'd been traveling for 2 months. So bless her heart, she said, that's Sky to her friend. And so we met in Paris by accident. And she had brought a book of letters that she had written to me that she couldn't send while I was traveling. I don't know why she brought them to Paris, but she did. So she gave them to me. And anyway, she is now my wife many years later. And we have a daughter who's about 9 years old. So that was an experience of deep connection and like soulmate level synchronicity,
Yeah, that's incredible. Like it's such a great example of, a lot of times people get so caught up and concerned about what if I miss the one, because I did this, that, or the other. And it's like, I feel like if you're really meant to connect with someone and we have these soul contracts from my perspective, it's actually the issue created the alignment in this case, right? Like you ended up in Paris because of what happened with you. She ended up there, it's like life's what happens when your plans don't work out. It's like when you just trust that exactly who you're meant to connect with is going to happen. If it doesn't happen, then it's not for you. And I feel like that's such a great example of, it's bigger than your plans, the connectivity.
Yeah. And there's so much to this. Like, I like taking apart the language a little bit around like the meant to, because that's a common word that people use. If it's meant to happen, then it's meant to happen.
Right.
I think that this is what I'm trying to piece apart. It's because it's subtle. It can be disempowering to think, well, if it's not meant to happen, it's not meant to happen. And that makes me not try.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so we don't want that to happen. And there's a sense of, because here's what flow is. Here's the definition somewhat of how Mihai Csikszentmihalyi talks about it. He's the author of the book Flow. Mm-hmm. A positive psychologist. Great book, Flow. And it's about, we often live life in a state of trying to control things. And other times we get tired of that and we say we want to just let go of control and surrender to life. Mm-hmm. But flow is not as easy as either of those. It's about finding that middle ground.
The dance.
The dance. Here's the statement. It's letting go of the worry about whether you're in control. Yeah. And that's really profound for me to realize that while I'm dealing with all this stuff in my day, what's really happening is a higher meta level conversation around being worried about the whole situation.
Yeah,
and when I can let go of that, then I can get into that experience of flow. Yep. And really see that the underlying question is about how am I relating to myself? Ultimately.
Right. I love that. That's so powerful. Letting go of the worry about whether you are in control or not. It's like it's like everything in this world. It's both and neither. I would say it's like from when and what perspective are we speaking? Right? It's like relative truths. To me, is how I view it. Is like much of what has happened in my life has come from taking inspired action, and I think that's a part of it. Is like flow is sort of inspired act, not just taking action, trying to force a square peg in a round hole. I'm trying to force something to happen because I have this idea from 4 years ago that I'm supposed to be a doctor, and now I'm really not feeling it like I once was. But I've told this story over and over, so I've got to keep forcing it, even though it's drudgery for me to do it because it's not in my highest excitement. It's like taking action from that highest excitement, and then knowing when to once you've taken action, then being able to release any attachment or expectation, and like you said, releasing, caring at all about how the dynamics of how it works. I think is really this is sort of the dance, wearing both hats, if you will.
Yeah, and I think it's really important that core one thing. What is life really what's happening in life? What is it really about? And is it about the things that we're actually doing, or something underneath or a meta above it around how, like I said, how we are treating ourselves, how we're experiencing our own experience? So I have a reading on that I'd love to share with you from the book.
Oh, sure. Yes, please.
And this is really getting at how I think that feelings, how we feel about life and how we're experiencing our life internally, is a core driver for synchronicity.
Okay.
Hidden feelings matter. Feelings become our enemy when we don't know what we feel. A hidden feeling can cause an unfortunate synchronicity. By untangling the mess of our feelings, our response to our natural emotions, we can more easily trace the underlying currents of synchronicity, and our emotions are more likely to empower us rather than undermine us. By contrast, when we are directed by hidden feelings, we might feel like victims of circumstance. We just can't see how our choices may be shaping the situation, and the same frustrating things keep happening to us. Why? Because in the responsive cosmos, we are active participators in the unfolding of events. Things don't happen to us, they happen through us. We connect to the future branches of the tree which align with our actions. So there I'm referring to the tree of what I call the tree of possibilities, which is an apple tree in my model, where the different branches of the tree are the different things that could happen in your life. And apples represent the weight of those branches based on how they align with your choices.
Interesting. Yeah, I love that. All of that is super, empowering, just to once you start to understand sort of the mechanics of all of this stuff and how to dance and enjoy the process. And, more important, I would say, than what it is that you're doing is how you're experiencing it, in the moment. And I think that's a big one that a lot of people, I know myself, you get so caught up on goals and making it somewhere, you forget to stop and smell the roses, to enjoy the process. Life is this idea that life is the journey. It's about the journey, not the destination, right?
Yeah. 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 I mean, just yesterday I had an experience of this myself where you can imagine, there's a lot going on with the release of my first book, and there's a lot of pieces to that puzzle, and promoting it and having everything in place I've got a lot of pressure on myself to make it really worthwhile, take advantage of the opportunity here. And, I feel that kind of pressure a lot when things that matter to me are happening.
Sure.
And so I woke up and I was going through some steps and getting more and more worried about the upcoming events, and really because I really didn't know what to do to help. What am I going to do today that's actually going to move this forward? And I felt my stress level rising, and what am I going to do with this? And finally I realized that I needed to step away from that experience, because it's actually the experience I'm having that is most important. It's not the things I'm doing.
Yes.
It's the experience I'm having. And that's really going to make the launch of the book or whatever it is that we're doing in our lives successful. And so I actually left the house and drove around the Bay Area, actually visiting bookstores and talking to them, giving them my card, and, encouraging them to order the book, which was kind of time intensive. And I don't know how much impact that has in the really bigger picture, but I think it really it does have a big impact. And especially in the fact that I got into the flow. I started talking with people face to face about what I'm doing. And that was much different than sitting in my room, trying to keep up on Facebook or email.
Yeah. What a great example. I absolutely love that example, and the fact that you were aware enough in the moment, like you said, you feel and sense the stress kicking in and the disempowering thoughts kicking in, and then you catch yourself, right? And actually, what's most important is how I'm experiencing this moment now, and by choosing to tune to another channel like you did, and then that actually has energetic repercussions for how things actually go that are beyond anything that I feel we can see. And I'm curious to hear, maybe dive a little bit deeper down the rabbit hole on your research into the foundation of quantum mechanics and how that, I know you have a process you call meaningful history selection, and just curious, what part does quantum mechanics play?
Yeah, well, quantum mechanics is a well-tested and decently understood theory of the universe, and it explains the physical world that we know to extreme accuracy. So there's no doubt whether quantum mechanics is essentially right in its domain of what it describes. And one of the biggest challenges from a theoretical point of view is that there is no law that says quantum mechanics just applies to little particles, subatomic particles. It really just applies as a basic concept, this idea that everything is represented by an entity in this thing called a Hilbert space, or it's like an abstract space where you can represent things, and that space has the characteristic that you can have multiple versions of something overlapping with each other, and that's something we know to be. I mean, we can do all sorts of experiments on that with particles like electrons and atoms like silver and things like that, but trying to understand how that shows up in the everyday world, from the very beginning, people were like, it's obvious that quantum mechanics doesn't apply to everyday objects because my couch across the room is in one state. It's not like overlapping with itself in a different state. Right. It's not like sideways and upside down at the same time. And so that led to this sort of assumption that it's obvious that quantum mechanics doesn't apply to the everyday world. And then all sorts of effort has been made to explain why that is.
Right.
But the mathematics doesn't say that. The mathematics says this is how the world works. It applies at all scales. There's no scale at which this doesn't apply from a mathematics perspective. Although there's been some mathematics developed to show that, called decoherence theory. But what's interesting about that question is that the statement that it's obvious that quantum mechanics doesn't apply to the real world, I think, is misguided, because what we're saying is, here's what quantum mechanics is, if you're to boil it down. Quantum mechanics is the study of what the world is doing when you're not watching.
Right.
What it's saying is, when you're not looking at an electron, it's evolving into many different possible states. And when you do observe it takes one of those states for sure. Right. Relative to you.
It goes from like quantum superposition to one position, right?
Right. So and then you just apply that to the regular world. Well, when you look at everything you've ever experienced has been something you've looked at or gained information about by interacting with it. And so just like the electron, it's in a definite state when you do that. The question is, what was it doing when you weren't observing it? That's what quantum mechanics is about. And that's a much more difficult question to answer. Very, very subtle. Like, can I be sure of what's going on in the kitchen in the other side of my house?
You can't, because every time you look, it's there, and we know that.
Right. And I can gain information about it. I know it's not on fire because there's no alarms going off, and I don't smell smoke, so I don't have any. I have information about that, but that's all based on information I have. Right. And here's the real step. It's not that I don't know what's going on in the kitchen. It's that I can't say for certain that any particular thing is going on. Maybe there's a superposition of possibilities going on.
Or that there's even a kitchen there at all. The way I think about it is, you look at the comparison between like a programmed video game and all the overlaps between our reality and it. It's like, we pixelate when you zoom in. It's made of light. It's someone has programmed it. There's certain rules that have been set up, and it's like, well, what happens in a video game as you're walking into the castle to save the princess? The castle is rendering as you choose which path to go down. Is that what's going on? That's what I often think, and it's sort of mind blowing. It's like when I go up the stairs to my bedroom later, is it being rendered as I walk in that direction? And now there's like nothing there, it's really mind boggling.
So let's piece that apart a little bit. So there's this thing called optimistic synchronization, which is a method for synchronizing video games that are being played remotely across the world, because everybody's video game is at a different speed, and their connection is at a different speed. So the world is being rendered just for you, the user, in that moment in the game, and any interactions you're having are being rendered based on the information that you have, and any information that's missing is guessed. So they sort of optimistically guess where the person's going to be, even if they're not sure, and then you can interact with the world. And I think that's a really good model for how this works. I want to be really careful with the language around the idea that maybe there isn't even a kitchen, because let's think really, really practically here. If there isn't a kitchen, well, I know there was a kitchen half an hour ago when I was in there. Right. So if there's not a kitchen, it's because something drastic happened to my house. It's not that things aren't there when we don't look. It's that there's a superposition of how they could evolve. And I'm pretty sure that the kitchen's still there because I haven't heard the house cracking. So I would say that I'm pretty clear that the kitchen is there, but the question of whether the coffee pot is still on or not, that is a real question that has a history to it, whether my wife turned it off when she left the house or not, or whether I bumped it with the loaf of bread when I was making a sandwich for my daughter to go to school. There's a history, and what synchronicity is about is how the world is able to have those histories fall into place retroactively to keep up with the choices I'm making as I go through the world and it renders for me.
So, I hear what you're saying. You're like, okay, I'd hear it cracking apart, but would you? What if just there's void there, right? It's just like dissipates completely. Like there's, it dissipates and then regenerates itself.
Well,
right?
I don't know.
You wouldn't hear anything.
I don't know that that's a different question. As a physicist, I like to stick to the interpretation, the simplest interpretation. That,
right.
We know that there's no theory that explains how things can just dissipate and reemerge. And I don't have a theory for that either. So my theory is trying to say, look, we know that the laws of physics are what they are, but is there a way in which, when we're not observing them, that just like quantum mechanics says, and the math all supports it, that, or a lot of the math supports it, that the system is evolving via normal laws of physics, but in different possible paths at a macroscopic level. And then, so we don't have to ask the question of, well, what is the void and these kind of things, which I think are a little bit of a rabbit hole that's hard to approach, at least from my perspective as a physicist.
Sure. All right. Well, now seems like a good moment to take a quick minute to tell those of you who aren't familiar a bit about our sponsor, Gaia. I've been a big fan of Gaia for many years now, which is why they're the only content provider I've ever reached out to in regards to potentially supporting this podcast. So needless to say, I'm very excited they're now supporting the show. Gaia truly is my personal go-to source for streaming consciousness content on the web. They have an incredible 7,000 plus exclusive videos covering 5,000 years of wisdom. Just to give you an example, on the show Missing Links, the incredible researcher Greg Braden explores all the biggest questions concerning who we are, where we come from, where we're going, by connecting the missing links between science and spirituality to complete our understanding of humanity's history and to better understand the interconnectedness of all things. Awesome, right? And that's just one example. As you guys constantly hear me say, it's a daily conscious effort to maintain an elevated vibration. And if you're looking to go deep down the rabbit hole to do so, then Gaia is the best place I know of to do it, period. And you can sign up for your first month for only 99 cents at gaia.com/positivehead. That's spelled GAIA.com/positivehead. Check it out.
So I didn't get to read this other story. Can I tell you this other story that's a really simple synchronicity?
I hate stories. Absolutely not.
So this is I was in grad school for physics and studying at San Francisco State University, and really excited to be back in school because it had been a while since I'd been in school, and college is a really cool experience, lots of learning, and I was enjoying the people. And they had this camping trip that they scheduled to have people bond. And this was in the first few weeks of my time there. So I was excited about the camping trip, but I was commuting like 2.5 hours by bus to get to school. So I lived a long way away from the campus. And so when they said there's going to be a camping trip, I figured, well, it's pretty impossible for me to get away with my family and drive like 3 hours to go wherever they're going to go camping. And I sort of assumed I wasn't going to go, even though I really wanted to. If I checked in with my core feelings, like I wanted to do this, I wanted to connect with my fellow classmates, and it's really fun to camp and play some music and whatever we do. So I sort of ignored it, and finally somebody asked me like a week before, "So are you coming on the camping trip?" And I said, "Well, I was going to, but I can't because it's a long way for me to come." And they said, "Well," I said, "but where is it?" Because I use this process of listen, open, reflect, release, and act. So I listened to this person brought this up again. This is showing up in my life. Maybe I need to pay attention to it. I opened my mind to the idea that maybe it's not impossible. Maybe there's some way to make it work. And then I reflected. And so I asked, where is the camping trip? Well, it turns out they were driving to me to go camping. The camping spot was 15 minutes from my house. And they were all taking these long drives through traffic to get up to my house, basically, to go camping. So I was like, of course, I should have known that might be the case. And so I released my attachment to it being difficult in this case. And I was like, yeah, I'll commit to going. That sounds great. So then a week later, we're getting ready to go camping. And I find out that my daughter's friend has a birthday party. And it's on the same day, or it's on the next day, the day after the camping trip. So it's like the day we would be waking up in the morning, and then there's a birthday party. And I'm like, oh man, I wanted you to come with me camping. I want to be at the party. I don't think we can do both. I don't know what to do. And then we ended up calling the parents and finding out that the birthday party was at the same campground where the graduate school camp out was happening, just down the street, like a 5-minute walk down in the park. And so, and the graduate school one was at an observatory, and the kid one was at a little birthday party park, So anyway, in the end, we ended up, I listened to the situation. I opened my mind to, well, maybe it's possible. I just need to find out the information. I reflected on, what are the logistics that need to happen? And it looks like it'll actually work for us to do it. And we spent the night at the camp out with the telescopes at the observatory. And then the next morning we walked 5 minutes to get to the birthday party and attended the party.
Wow. That's so
none
perfect.
of that would have happened if I held on to my view that it's just not going to work,
Right. Yeah. I love the idea. What comes to mind for me is sometimes I'll be talking to people. I've been to Burning Man like 7 times, and it's quite the camp out experience. It's a lot. And what comes to mind is talking to people sometimes about it who, really want to go, but tell the story like, oh yeah, it's, I didn't get a ticket, or I can't because of this, that, or the other. And it's like, and then I've seen people who just open themselves to, well, I'm going to see if something arises that makes it, feasible for me. And it's interesting to watch those two sort of approaches to that particular camp out, and how it will lead to such dramatically different experiences. And it's like anything in life, when you open to the possibility that there's a way, it's like quantum physics. There's all these potentialities, right? And so you start then tuning into the potential, the version of reality, I would say, where you end up going, if that's really which in your highest excitement. I love playing with this idea of, oh, that's in my highest excitement. And if there's infinite possibilities and timelines as I view it, then I'm going to tune into the one where I actually have that experience. And that has served me well, telling that particular story of how to create my reality.
Yeah, so I think of this as an apple tree. And one of the ways that I find this to be empowering is that when I come up against an obstacle, then that one branch on the tree and the apples beyond that on that branch might be blocked. And I'm like getting mad at the world or at somebody in my life for bringing up this obstacle. But if I have this view of this apple tree in my head, and I see that in front of me is this unfolding tree of all these possibilities, and on many of the branches are apples, then and the key is that all the apples are really different, but they satisfy the same goal. They represent the same inner intention of, in the case of the birthday party and stuff, it's like being connected and having a good time with the people in my life, whether it's my daughter or my classmates. And so these apples represent different versions of how that can come to be, that inner experience of being connected to the people in my life. And when there's a block on one branch, if I have the space of mind to listen and open and reflect and release, then I can see the other branches that might be possible, and I can have more harmony because I don't come into conflict with this branch. I see that there's other ways for me to get my needs met, and I can adjust and go with a sense of flow.
Yeah, I love that. Now, I know in Living in Flow, you discuss openly some of the scientific challenges that face your hypothesis. I'm always curious to hear, what do the naysayers say?
I think that there are, I discussed the main one, which is that people generally have worked out a very compelling practical way of doing physics without dealing with the question of macroscopic objects. And I think to a large extent, physicists have convinced themselves that it's adequate. And I just don't agree with that. I don't think because I think that our desire to explain the world as divided into macroscopic or not macroscopic versions is rooted in an inner mindset that's just the way we think it is, and it's hard to see it otherwise. And so I think we can expand our understanding of the world. And this includes, philosophical questions that have to be asked around what is the nature of the observer. And there are people definitely doing this work, but it's sort of sidelined a bit. It's a minor field in physics that some people are really taking seriously, but it's not part of, any of the major funding that's going on for like particle physics and stuff. Right. I mean, there's some of that, but so I think physicists, a lot of the physics community is based around developing new models that work with the old models, And we'll work with data, and a lot of the data we have is based off, it's very physical. And a lot of physicists go into physics because they think of the world as physical. And I think one of the challenges, I'm hesitating saying this because I don't want to generalize about physicists. Physicists are a very diverse bunch in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
But I think that the physics of the future needs to include an understanding of the observer, which is ourselves. And this means self-knowledge has to become a part of doing physics.
Right.
And because I think that when we're unclear about our own preferences for how the world should work, we can impose our own subconscious preferences on our models. And I think that's partly happened in the history of quantum mechanics. Now, I'm the same way. I mean, I can do the same, and I can be preferential for my view that synchronicity is a thing. And so it's on all of us to really do the inner work as well as the outer work with the mathematics and the models to try and bring those two into alignment.
Yeah.
And find some underlying truth.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Where does quantum entanglement play into all this for you? Spooky action at a distance, as Einstein, I think, talked about it. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
A lot of people get all hung up on spooky action at a distance and entanglement because it's really evidence that our model of reality is limited. Like our existing model of reality is pretty limited. And I mean, I would say the past 50 years of the type of theoretical physics that I'm talking about has been really taken up with, there's been experimental proof over and over and over that this is the case, and we know it to be the case. And
can you explain what it is for those out there who maybe haven't heard of quantum entanglement?
Sure. So it's if you have two particles that share a common origin in their, what I was talking earlier about the Hilbert space, in their abstract state is represented with some common origin, like one of them is spin up and one of them is a matching or opposite spin down. And for every pair of those particles, you always find them to be in opposite states. Let's say that's the case. You can set up experiments that do that. Then if you separate those particles a long way away and you do a measurement on one, you know what the measurement on the other is going to be without even doing the measurement, right? And
so they can be like miles away, basically, and they are affecting each other, right?
Yeah. As far as the distance doesn't matter, and that's the real problem. That in a materialistic worldview, we rely on space and time as the fundamental separation things. But in this entanglement, essentially shows us that space and time don't actually separate objects that are entangled.
Right.
And the key element here is that when you have these two objects that are far apart, then you can perform a different measurement on them that essentially scrambles their values, what we call an incompatible measurement. And if you scramble the value of one particle, the other particle will be essentially scrambled in a compatible way so that you can know what the other particle's outcome is going to be. And that's where the really, you can prove that there's this connection happening between those particles at a long distance. But it's a really subtle thing because you can't actually exchange information that way. There's no communication going on. It's not like you can send a signal that way across space and time. So I think for me, entanglement is overhyped. It's a absolutely clear evidence that the world is not sort of the physical, just strictly physical basis that we think it is. And but I think it's overhyped because the work that I think is interesting is sort of a more fundamental look at what is quantum mechanics, and entanglement is just a natural part of the way that I view that. It comes out of the oneness of what I call the work I'm doing is on Fourier transforms, and Fourier transforms do a communication. They add up all the contributions from the frequencies of a system and give you the location of it, for instance. And this is what we call non-local, or entanglement fits really well in this, where it's taking up information from all of space-time in order to gather information about some object. It's getting pretty abstract. I hope that's not too much.
No, I love it. Yeah, I mean, to me, it's just like, it's just a great piece of evidence that it is, it is, things are connected beyond, being in the same exact space. It's like it helps to really understand why a mother will all of a sudden have, some of the psychic sort of phenomenon, right? A mother, all of a sudden something happens with her child and she instantly knows and feels it and is scrambling to call them to check on them or whatever. Like those sorts of things happen all the time. And it's sort of like a very rudimentary way of showing that two things are connected in a way that one affects the other.
Yeah, and I think that people have been cautious about saying, just because consciousness is a mystery, or just because psychic stuff is a mystery, and just because quantum mechanics is a mystery, doesn't mean they're the same mystery. Doesn't mean we can explain one with the other. But sure. I think what it shows is that the physical world and quantum mechanics is far from a coherent, complete model of everything we know to be true in the world. There's a lot we don't know. And there's a lot of holes at the foundation of physics that before we go making claims about knowing, everything in the cosmos, we need to look at those holes in the foundation and say nothing on top of it is stable until we get the foundation right. And so I think that there is space for interpreting and understanding some of these more anomalous experiences. Not that we know how to do that yet, but I think there's space for that. And one of the things that I think is important in science is that scientists really need to have an open mind, or they can become just as dogmatic as anybody else.
Right.
So I think that's important. I don't stand behind any one view of those things, but I think it's important to have an open mind because we don't know.
Right. And I think I like the quote: "The more you know, the more you realize you don't know." And I think that would be a good one to be.
John Wheeler was a famous physicist, a great guy who I admire a lot, who said, as the island of our knowledge grows, so does the shore of our ignorance. Something like that.
Interesting. I love that.
So I actually have a story about Burning Man that you brought that up. It's an unusual Burning Man story, which doesn't actually involve me being at Burning Man.
All right. Hit me.
But it gets at sort of what I think is some of the key element of synchronicity showing up in the world, which is it's there to help us grow. Yeah. And it's not there to make us rich or famous or to solve our problems. It's there to help us heal and find the places in our lives where we're stuck and where we're not whole. So I was having this experience where I was interested in going to Burning Man. It had been many years since I've been once, and this was many years later. I decided I wanted to go, but I knew I wasn't going to go this year because it was my daughter's first day at a new school, and I wanted to stay around town. And it turned out that the first week of school was just a breeze for her. She was happy. There was really no reason for me not to go, except for the fact that it was already like Saturday morning of Burning Man, which is like there's a day and a half left of Burning Man, and I have no ticket. The
day of the burn, right?
I have no place to stay, but I've got this bug in me, like, well, if I don't try, I mean, this is what synchronicity is about for me. It's like seeing what the opportunities are and trying to figure out how to live fully. Yeah. So I thought about trying to go, and I really was struggling because as people talk about, like when you set your mind on going to Burning Man, you show up, you end up having what they call a miracle, and you get in, or you find a place to stay, and you have a free ticket, or whatever it may be. But it's 6 hours from my house, so it was a huge risk to like think about leaving my family for the weekend and driving up there and getting in. And what if I don't get in? I had a lot of fear come up in me around what if I can't do it, and then I'm stuck in my car, and I've wasted a lot of time, and I'm stressed out, and I'm scared, to not have it work. And this comes up a lot in life with me with synchronicities. Like I'm scared about what will happen if it doesn't work out. Yeah. So sometimes I can deal with that fear and find a way with flow to make it work out and trust and develop a faith that something positive will occur. I don't know what it will be, but something will happen. In this case, I kept agonizing and I couldn't pull the trigger to leave and go and drive there. And finally on Sunday morning, I got up at 6 a.m. I was agonizing over this. Should I leave right now? I'll get there by noon. It's becoming more and more of a waste of time. And finally, I realized that I had originally planned to go to this Center for Spiritual Living, which is a community that I'm part of, but I had never been to this one. And it's in town. And I had originally planned to go there this day. but I'd forgotten about it with the whole Burning Man shenanigans that I was experiencing.
Right.
I said, as long as I'm not in the car going to Burning Man, I should get in the car and go to the spiritual center and just experience that. That's like, at least I won't be wasting my time. So I went there, and it turns out that the talk that morning was about living from the heart. And one of the reasons I like this community is it's really a bunch of really connected, open-hearted, practically open-hearted people. And so I got a message that morning, and I had an experience with people that morning of really like looking at my life from a different perspective. So this question of should I go to Burning Man or shouldn't I go to Burning Man was through a lens of doing it right or wrong, and things are going to work or they're not, and I'm going to be in trouble. But there's this whole other lens that I could look through from my heart, which can encompass all of that and not be stuck in the duality or the dichotomy of this choice.
Right.
And can accept myself for maybe staying home. And what does that mean? And why am I so upset about I should have gone? And recognizing through that there's this hidden dialogue in my head. Like if I don't go, I'm not living my message. I'm not relying on synchronicity. And so by opening up my heart to myself in that moment, because of the message I got at this center of spiritual living, I was able to really get to the underlying dialogue that was going on for me around this dilemma, and able to reach a whole new place in myself of handling dilemmas like that. And then there's this great metaphor because 2 weeks before I had actually stepped on my glasses and broken them. So I had like snapped my glasses and been living without them, and I'd ordered a new pair. And that week after I got this message about living in my heart, my new glasses arrived.
Oh, wow.
So it was like looking at the world with a new pair of glasses.
I love that. Yeah, that's super. You were right where, you received what you needed most, right?
Yeah, I did.
I think that's the thing about these decisions that we can agonize over is like, you can't get it wrong. There's a song that I love, this group Gone Beyond, that it basically says that it's like, it's here for your amusement and you can't get it wrong, essentially. And when you can relax into that, it's like, just being in that stressful state is, it's like we talked about early on in this discussion. It's like, it's about the experience you're having in the moment more than the thing or action you're considering taking, right?
Right. Because ultimately there's always some feeling that I'm having underneath the decision that's causing me to be stressed about it.
Yep.
And if I can't identify that feeling, I'm just at the whim of this dilemma.
Yep.
But when I get into my heart and I can live from the heart authentically, then I can have more leeway to have there be no way to get it wrong. Every decision is okay, but as long as I can see what's going on in me, inside of me.
Right. One other thing, kind of circles us back a little bit, but it just popped up for me. And I anytime I have the chance to talk to someone who's as deep down the rabbit hole of physics as you are, I love to pick people's brain. And we talked about earlier, is the kitchen there? Is it not there? And I don't know if you've heard, I'm sure you've heard some of these fascinating stories of, are you familiar with the book Autobiography of a Yogi by Yogananda?
Yeah, Paramahansa Yogananda.
Okay. Yeah. So there's a story in there of, of course, all kinds of stories that defy what we, normal physics. And one of them is this idea of an amulet, materializing for his mother, I believe. I actually haven't even read it. My son's been reading it. He's been telling me all about it. And an amulet, appearing out of nowhere, essentially. And so I'm curious, from a physicist standpoint, who's sort of open to a lot of this stuff, or more open than the average physicist for sure, I would say. What are your thoughts on something like that, where you're getting into objects that materializing? And do you first, do you believe it's true? And if so, what are your thoughts on how that ties into physics?
Yeah, so I'm going to leave that question somewhat unanswered, because I think the main thing is that we don't know. There's a lot we don't know. As a physicist, I feel it's really important to be open-minded.
Yep.
And I personally find there's a lot of value to sticking with what I do know.
Yep.
And what are the hidden assumptions in what I think I know that might be wrong, which leads to the minimal amount of modification of what we know in order to, but really analyzing, well, what don't we know in that? What are the hidden assumptions? And so for me, I guess the purpose of that is that I don't want to question everything. I want to question the things that are most worth questioning that I can actually make some progress on. Doesn't mean that the other things shouldn't be questioned, but I don't have answers to, everything, all these different pieces. But I do have some ideas on a couple key pieces that I think are bad assumptions that we make, and those are the ones that I stick to in my analysis.
Safe answer. And fair, a safe and fair answer.
Those assumptions are: we think we know what's going on in the world when we're not looking. We think something definite, even if we don't know what's going on in the world, we think something definite is happening. And I would say there's not something definite happening. There's an evolution of the world into many possibilities. When you go and you open up the door and the door knocks and you open up the door, that particular history of who's there falls into place in that moment retroactively, like the optimistic synchronization of the video game. Their entire path of how they ended up showing up at your door and getting the information about your house and whatever it is all falls into place retroactively because the world outside of our walls is undetermined. It's evolving into many possibilities. And so that's what I think is the core flaw in our main worldview that needs to be examined. And that there's also some pieces of physics that I think are core things that we've overlooked that I try and use to tie into that. Right.
Is there any question? Did you have something else you wanted to add?
No, that's good. But I do like, I think the safe answers can be good in the sense that physics is a conservative field and there's a good reason for that. It allows us to make real progress when we do make real progress. And I honor that and I respect that. So I like sticking to as much of what we know and then trying to move from there in some real way. Right. But again, I really honor the many questions that can be asked and should be asked from different perspectives, and I don't discount those at all.
Yeah, and especially when those things keep popping up, it's like at some point, and what your answer was, very fair. I get it. It's but when you have stories like that one, that's just one example. But I've heard lots of similar stories from a doctor, for example, whose patient dying and all of a sudden a feather appears, and he's like shocked by what he witnesses happening because there's no way she'd have this feather. And then, she passes and supposedly it was given to her by someone in spirit. And then she passes and he hangs it on the wall in a paper bag or in a plastic bag. And over time it just like shrinks and finally disappears. It's like, there's like lots of that sort of thing. That's like, okay, at some point, and I know it's so beyond where we're at and what we understand, but it will be interesting, if indeed Nassim is right, is like, we come to, understand, or Arthur C. Clarke, magic is just science that we don't understand yet. We get to the point where we actually have an understanding, and I personally think it will tie into the idea of multiple timelines and things like that, which I know gets pretty abstract, but it's I think a lot of that will start to come forward.
And I know people studying that who I respect a lot, and but there's a story. So I don't have a perspective on whether that's possible. But I do have some thoughts on different ways that can show up and has shown up in my life, which have been kind of mind-blowing and yet at the same time really interestingly practical. There's a book by Richard Bach called The Blue Feather, I think, something like that. And this has an analogy to that where he talks about manifesting this idea that he's going to find a blue feather. And he's testing the idea of manifestation, and he says, I'm going to find a blue feather. and then he comes back the next day and has been sent a magazine or something with a picture of a blue feather on it. And so this is a way in which the physics hasn't been violated, right? Because the physics of the blue feather on the magazine cover, there's a whole history to that. The blue feather was photographed by the team that made the magazine and was put on the magazine cover by the editor. And, it showed up in his lap because he bought it at a store or somebody brought it to him. All these coincidences that brought the blue feather image to him. But it wasn't an actual blue feather. It showed up in a different form.
Yep.
But it gets to something I think is really profound and important, which is that prior to physics comes this symbolic realm that we live in a world of experiences. And this is really core to what I'm saying in the book and in my work. We live in a world of experiences, and we are each having experiences. And from those experiences, we can describe the physics of those experiences, or we can describe the spiritual way that we interpret those experiences. But ultimately, it's the experiences that are the foundation. And those experiences, I think the language of those experiences is symbolic in some way. So when I say I need to find a blue feather, there's an equivalence between an actual physical blue feather and a picture of a blue feather, because it's the experience I'm having of the blue feather that is the fundamental thing.
Yeah.
So there's a lot that could be said about that. And I think that in itself undermines or transplants a lot of what physics is about into sort of a new context. But I try and go into that in the book to a decent extent and support it.
Wow. I love that. I love that perspective and angle of kind of exploring this fascinating topic. What you just brought up actually reminded me of a story, and I don't know if this is one I've ever even told on the podcast. And usually, the listeners have heard my stories of synchronicity and magic. In some cases, many times. I've been a long time listener. I've been known to repeat myself a time or 10. This one, I don't know if I've ever told it. And it just came to me. It's like many years ago, probably a decade ago, I was my old business partner. I was explaining, all of my thoughts on the ultimate nature of reality to him and manifestation, and he was sort of intrigued and interested, but semi-skeptical, And so, I got on a rant about it one day with him soon after I'd met him. And I remember saying, by putting our energy into something, we can play with these ideas of manifesting things and see the tangible results. And then I all of a sudden just spouted out to him, for example, you're going to see or hear something about climate change within, the next 24 hours. And he's just kind of looked at me like head cocked, like, okay. And I'm like, yeah. And by saying this, I've actually put the wheels in motion, created the energy to manifest this happening. And the more I believe it, the more energy I put into it, the more more likelihood of it happening. And actually, there's no likelihood that it won't not happen in this moment. I have hereby decreed it, kind of thing, right? Mm-hmm. So I did this experiment with him. And so that was in, I want to say the morning, early morning one day. That night, we decided to have a cookout with our next door neighbors, and the neighbor had written down his list of things that we needed to get. He was going to cook or something, and he gave it to my friend, and my friend went to the store and, got the ingredients and came back, and we had our dinner and everything. And then the next day, it's over 24 hours later, he's like, well, that didn't happen, kind of thing. You didn't manifest it. Hours after that, he ends up going to throw away the list of, what he needed to get at the grocery store. On the other side of it was a picture of a polar bear on an ice cap thing and, something about climate change. And he's like, oh my God, I was handed this yesterday evening, and it was just like such an awesome example of playing with this idea of manifesting something like the blue feather. Yeah. I hadn't thought of that in a long time. And he talked about that story for years and years,
That's great.
As an example. So very, very cool. And now, what it gets me thinking about, Sky, is like, I don't do that sort of thing enough. Like, how come all these years later, I'm not like playing in that way to call in, right. something into my blue feather, right?
I'm glad you brought that up, because I think this is a really important and subtle element that is worth talking about. Now let me tell you a story about, I went to a theater about 2 months ago with my friend who invited me at the last minute to go to the city, San Francisco, and go to a theater. This is a little tiny theater, a black box. And it turns out that there's this physicist sitting behind me in the audience, and we strike up a conversation. And it's hard for me to explain what I do without, sounding like I'm just making stuff up unless I really have time to explain myself. But sure. I give this example of, like, for instance, there's a bottle sitting in the middle of this is an intermission, and there's a bottle in the middle of the floor, which is the stage, and it's just standing there. It's empty. It's part of the props. And I said, for instance, like if that bottle got knocked over, that would be, there's a superposition of possibilities that the bottle stays upright and the bottle gets knocked over. And I don't know which is going to happen. And I can't know, but I was trying to explain the different possibilities, and he didn't really believe what I was, get into what I was talking about. He thought I was,
kooky,
not in alignment with him. And then in the next scene, when the show started again, accidentally one of the actors kicked the bottle and went flying across the room and landed on the side of and they had to just let it go because it was one of their props, but they couldn't go fix it because it was in the middle of the act. And
wow.
But the key here is that I think there can be a tendency to try and feel like we're in some kind of control of this, and our ego can try and wrap itself around these situations and make them happen, try and get involved in controlling the flow and trying to make things happen, and feeling like I'm manifesting something. And I think that misses the deeper teaching, which is that we are all immersed in this experience, and we are connected, and we got to stop assuming we're not connected, so that when we see that we're connected by having something like that happen, we're not surprised, and we don't turn it into a whole story about, well, look what I manifested. Because we're part of this world, and we are essentially part of the manifestation of the reality that we live in. And this is really important from, dealing with the problems that we face today, of how we need to see ourselves as part of the creation of the problems and part of the creation of the solution. And we are manifesting this every day. The more we can touch into living fully from our heart, being authentic in our lives, and let go of the attachment to whether we're being successful at manifesting it or not. Allows us to get it. And that's what flow is, right?
Yeah. I love that point, because it's an important one. It's like, this, I feel like humility is the key word with all of the exploration of this stuff. We are all the one. I think like a stopping off point for a lot of people, on, as their sort of perspective expands, regarding who and what they are and their place, beyond even their earthly existence, is the spiritual narcissism pitfall. It's like, because you start tapping into this feeling of how powerful you truly are. And, this idea that I'm the one, it's but we're all the one. And, for every time I may get in an excited state and vibrationally align enough to make to step into a reality where the climate change prediction came true. But I certainly can step into ones or whatever's going on behind the scenes that determines whether you see it or don't see it. I've certainly had experiences where, I haven't been able to manifest what I want. A great example of that one is one of the first things when I started really opening up to a lot of these concepts. I read a book, and I don't even remember what it was. This is a long time ago, and going back about 20 years now. And I read somewhere this guy was talking about getting, tapping into, all of his realizations regarding the ultimate nature of reality and how it's all connected. And so he had a profound experience communicating with animals. And this is a story that regular listeners have heard a few times, but it's a great example of what I was just stating and what you were getting at, I think. And, I read this book where this guy's talking all about having this powerful experience where he's like calling animals to him, and this interactions happening that's unexplainable from normal perspective. And so I get really excited reading this, and I'm like, oh wow, I want I'm in this heightened state. One thing I noticed is a lot of times when these things work, it's like you're in a really heightened state vibrationally, and I was in a really heightened state vibrationally at this moment, really excited, that childlike wonder and belief. Which is a key ingredient, I believe. And so I'm in this room. I live in a 6-bedroom house in Nashville, Tennessee at the time. There's six other people, and I had the master, so it was pretty big in a house that large. And so I noticed across the room, probably 10 plus feet in the corner from where I'm sitting, there was a moth, just like flying, in the corner of the room. And so I looked at the moth and I thought to myself, okay, if he can do it, I can do it. I'm excited. Like, I hold my hands out and literally this thing, probably 12 feet across the room, flies and lands in the center of my palms instantly as soon as I hold my hands out. And I'm like, holy smokes, this thing just flew all the way across this room, this huge room, landed here. I'm just like in awe. I've tried it many times since over the years. Never has it worked again. I think for me defining my own meaning, I think I got the message of what I needed
You're
in that
connected.
time. And Yep. And it was just incredible. And I've probably tried it at least a dozen times since without the moth coming and landing in my hands.
Yeah. Well, so I have a reading from the book that I think really touches on this.
Great.
Here it is. Feelings pull experiences to us like water is pulled to the sea. It may not be clear which path water will take, but it adapts to the terrain and eventually arrives at its destination. In the same way, meaningful experiences are drawn like rainwater, one way or another, down the mountainside toward us. We may not be able to predict which actual circumstance will occur, but we can count on it reflecting the nature of our inner experience. Our feelings drive the events in our lives. The exact form of each experience we draw to ourselves is unpredictable, but the circumstances are likely to reflect the feelings behind our action. So the feeling that you might have in that moment of, is a powerful one. I'm gonna communicate with this animal, and there's something to that that's a juju that you have that is sort of hard to capture, hard to explain, and you might not be able to capture that again in the future when you try it. Your head might get in the way. I mean, this happens for me all the time when I try something the first time. And it's my feelings are like all in it, and then the second time and third time, I'm like trying to rethink how I did it the first time. Yeah, I was just listening to that book, Becoming Supernatural. That I was talking about earlier in the show, and same thing. I'm early on in the book, but there's an incredible story of him having an experience, basically, sort of like, it's seeing a 3D holographic image of his pineal gland, and then it opening up, and then seeing like a pocket watch in front of him with the hands going backwards, and all of a sudden he was tapped into his 7-year-old self having an experience, and then he was also then it went forward, and he was tapped into a future version of himself in this life, having this powerful experience, and then they're turned into this thing where like. It turned into this wild thing where he was observing his future self and feeling everything that his future self is having in the backyard at midnight in a cold night, and whatever. And then he's also looks over in the window and sees himself from earlier in that night having an experience that he, and it's like this multi-layered connection to these other versions of himself. And it was just explained and laid out in such a fascinating way. And I'm summarizing it. I would recommend reading it for sure. And, anyway, he went back and at this point in the book, he's like, I tried many times and was not able to recreate it. Exactly that. My head got in the way. It's like I was, so I think that's an interesting recurring thing that I think happens with a lot of us on this path to expanding, our perceptions and abilities, if you will. Yeah. What I think is really the core message of flow for me is that, like we were saying, if it was just about taking control of life, that would be kind of easy. There's classes you can take on that. If it was just about surrendering, that's also an easy bypass of, the spiritual path. Just surrender to life, let anything happen. But flow is really about not knowing what's going to happen in the moment and not knowing what's needed from me. Every situation, for instance, with my family, when my daughter comes home from school, every situation is different. Some days I need to show up one way. Some days I need to show up another way. Maybe I need to ask her more questions and be there for her. Maybe I need to just totally leave her alone. Maybe I need to joke and laugh. Maybe I need to be serious. And I can't know except by showing up in the moment and having an interaction and relating to the situation directly. Yeah. And so for me, it's been a real teaching in becoming more authentic in my life and actually connecting with people and actually relating to people. And I've found that there's all sorts of layers of my own protection that I've built up from when I was younger, of how to protect myself from being hurt by people and feeling judged and feeling insecure. And flow, the process of flow, keeps leading me to situations that forces me to actually show up, because I can't be successful in dealing with the circumstances of my life unless I am showing up more and more authentically to the situation and reading it better and reading other people better and communicating honestly with them. And so it's been a real path for me of personal growth, of healing some of the wounds that I have around that have kept me separate from people in my life, you know?
Yeah. And I think it ties back to what you learned with your Burning Man, or your not Burning Man experience, was
right.
Having an open heart is like, you know, to creating, taking down those walls of separation, tapping into what is called for in the moment, you know, tapping into your intuition about that, you know, if you will. It all like stems from that open-hearted state, I would say.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And that's a big message in my book. I try and, you know, in the end of the book, I get into the science to an extent that I think satisfies people who want to know what the nuts and bolts are. But the whole first 5 or 6 chapters are really examining what we're talking about here so why is this important for us in daily life? Yeah. How does flow show up for me? How does it teach me to be more authentic and address some of the challenges? How do the challenges in the world outside my walls, you know, the bigger issues that we're all sort of grappling with in the world, how do those reflect what's going on in my personal life?
Right.
How is there an alignment between, you know, can I, you know, we look at our politics and we look at how people just can't seem to agree on anything. Well, how does that also reflect in the way that I run my life, and how able am I to find middle grounds and find flow to compromises with people? Because I think that ultimately the solutions to the bigger problems come down to us as individuals having a different experience of our lives. And that's an experience where we are really engaged in a sense of what we're here to do in the world. Like, what drives us? What brings us a sense of fun and joy? What challenges us to grow into bigger versions of ourselves? And the more we can grow into bigger versions of ourselves, the more likely that we will find the solutions we need in the external world to move our culture forward. Right. Well, this has been absolutely amazing, Sky. I feel like I could talk to you forever. Such a wonderful flow of this conversation. What is the best way for people to connect with you who want to, you know, continue to follow your work and maybe reach out to you and, of course, get your book? Well, I'd love to. Yeah. My book's website is livinginflowbook.com. And I also have a website, skynelson.com, which has free items you can download of my writing. I've got an active blog that I'm on every week. I've got music there, and all sorts of stuff. And then my platforms, I'm on Facebook a lot. I have a strong presence there. And I'm also on Twitter and Instagram and LinkedIn and Goodreads.com, you know, that kind of stuff, author platforms. So yeah, please reach out to me. Buy the book. It's available in bookstores, and it's available at Amazon or Barnes & Noble or online. And also indiebound.com is a great independent resource for booksellers. So you can find me a lot of places, and I'd love to stay in touch. Excellent. I do have one final question here for you, Sky, and that is this. What is the meaning of life according to Sky Nelson-Isaacs? Well, any action can be meaningful. Anything we do defines some responsiveness that the universe may have. So I can try to work on my work presentations, and the cosmos will respond by bringing me more opportunities at work. Or I can work on developing stronger relationships with my family, and the opportunities to build those relationships will show up synchronistically. So anything we do is meaningful. I think it's really about purpose, that we're not only finding our purpose, but finding a sense of purpose. So when we string our actions together, realizing that everything we do is meaningful, everything we do has the power to influence events in the world, then we figure out how do we bring a sense of purpose to that experience? And that means not just something like some divine purpose that we might have, but just how do we show up in life with a sense of purpose? How do we show up with the purpose of connecting more with people and growing as a human being, becoming a more whole human being, and healing the wounds that we may have picked up in our youth so that we can become a source of comfort and enlightenment for other people.
I love that. So powerfully said. Sky, this has truly been a pleasure and an honor. Thank you so much for the work that you do. And I'm excited about your new book, and I'm sure all the listeners are as well. And hopefully our paths will cross in 3D at some point. And till then, journey well, my friend.
Thank you, Brandon. I appreciate the opportunity.
Take care.
You too. Bye-bye.
Well, everyone, that concludes this week's interview episode. Before we sign off, I wanted to let you all know that we have finally created the Game with the Universe on our website, where you can choose the first number that comes to your mind, and it'll pull up that episode number of the podcast. I've been saying this is a great way to co-create synchronicity and magic with your higher self for quite some time by doing this manually. But now if you go to positivehead.com/YO universe, there is a super fun and simple interface to play this game with your higher self. I firmly believe just by setting the intention to play in this way, it opens up the door for magic, and it's a synchronistic way to hone in on nuggets of wisdom out of the huge catalog of episodes that are specifically appropriate for you at this time in your journey to becoming the next greatest and grandest version of yourself. And it also makes for a super fun way to engage and invite friends, family, people on social media to check out the podcast as well. So be sure to check out positivehead.com/YOUNIVERSE, and be sure to tell all your friends so they can play a game with the universe, which also helps the show to reach new people, which I greatly appreciate. And as a quick reminder, be sure to also check out positivehead.com/transformation if you're curious to learn more about Purium superfoods and why I take them every day. On this journey of becoming the next greatest and grandest version of ourselves that we have all embarked upon, I can't stress the importance of managing your physical vibration enough. And quite honestly, Purium has put together the simplest plan I've found to do so, and I'm sincerely excited to share it with all of you. Otherwise, as you continue on your fabulous journey in this 3D reality, be sure to remember this. As long as you ain't dead, you're already positive ahead. Journey well, everyone, and thank you for being.